So needless to say, the wrestling business saw the passing of the biggest name, arguably, in the history of the sport or the business. And people have had lots of reactions to that over the past couple of days. Tone deaf, appropriate, not appropriate, running a full gamut. And I knew that it was an inevitability that someday I would have to come on here and make this video. And for a variety of different reasons, was certainly not a day that I was looking forward to. So let's talk about the very complicated legacy that Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan, has left behind. And I start off with this. I think about life and the people that impact our life. You have those direct influences and those indirect influences. And I know some of you have been wondering, like, why haven't I recorded lately? Where have I been? What's going on? And it actually ties into the direct influence bucket. It was about 6 weeks or so ago that I found out that my mom passed away from advanced liver cancer. With that said, it was a surprise to me because I did not know she had cancer. I did not know she was in the hospital. I did not know that she was in hospice care. I did not know that she was dying. I did not know that she had died. The way that I found out, she died on Friday, June 13th. I think that was the date. Either way, it's irrelevant. That Friday, and then the following Monday, I find out when I log in for work, and within 5 minutes, I get a message that comes through email from LinkedIn from somebody that let me know that she had passed away. Now, I hadn't talked to my mom in a few months. She didn't know that I had just gotten my degree from VCU back in May. Lots of history there, good, bad, otherwise. Point I'm getting at in, certainly, when I think about direct influences on my life, my mom was one of them. Some positive and plenty of negative, frankly. And leaves a whole bunch of conflicted emotions behind for me to have to wrestle with and deal with. And frankly, we'll just ultimately probably end up burying that stuff because it's going to be really hard to get closure. You just have to pack it away and move the fuck along with your life. That's what life is all about. So it's ironic that arguably the biggest direct influence on my life passes away, and no more than a month and a half later, arguably the single biggest indirect influence on my life passes away in Hulk Hogan. Now, sure, you're looking at me rocking the Michael Jordan shirt, and you would think, well, I would think he would have the most indirect influence. Certainly had a lot. But when I look back at my life and how things have played out, Hogan is the biggest indirect influence on my life. Even though I didn't know the man personally, even though I didn't meet the man at any point in time in my life, there's no question about it. And I know I've talked about Hogan's legacy, I think a couple of years ago in a video on this channel, and I talked about this a little bit, right? In terms of, I look back at my life, and so many of the things that have happened in my life, whether directly or indirectly, have come out of my association with and fandom for professional wrestling, which all ties back into Hulk Hogan in the 80s, growing up in that era of the WWF and of professional wrestling, and being a raging, screeching Hulkamaniac, right? So many friends that I've made over the years, so many things I've been able to do. The fact that all of you that are watching this, whether you like me or not, even have clicked on this video and know who the hell I am in one way or another, is because of Hulk Hogan. I live out here in Virginia because, indirectly, of Hulk Hogan. Everything I'm at in terms of my career, graduating from VCU, like all of these things follow in a pecking order, tying back to that indirect influence of my fandom as a kid growing up and into adulthood of Hulk Hogan and professional wrestling. It's true. And I'm not going to sit there and lie about that and pretend like that doesn't happen. So when I found out the news last week that Hulk Hogan passed away, there were all types of like conflicted feelings and emotions for me. Because when you think about Hulk Hogan, the wrestler, Hulk Hogan, the sports entertainer, here are the things that you really can't deny. No matter how much you might not like his backstage politics, his lying, him as a person, other things that we will certainly address in a couple of moments, here are some indisputable truths to me. Hulk Hogan is the biggest superstar in the history of professional wrestling. I think it was even Dave Meltzer tweeted this. I was surprised to see him say this, but he's absolutely correct. There's been no wrestler ever in history that more people have paid more money to watch or have watched than Hulk Hogan. And it's not close. You might be a Flair guy or an Austin guy or a Rock guy or a Cena guy, whatever. Fine. You can have your favorites, but we can't get away from just material, raw, frickin' indisputable facts. Just like when you say who's the greatest villain and heel in the history of professional wrestling on so many different levels is Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Like, this is not up for debate. Who's the biggest superstar, the biggest star, the biggest money draw in the history of professional wrestling is Hulk Hogan, let's be clear, by a country fucking mile. Even to this day, so many of the things that WWE's foundation has been built on is laid on a foundation that was built on the back of the Hulkamania era and built on the back of Hulk Hogan. Like, this is a guy that in the 80s was the guy that crossed over into pop culture in a way that no professional wrestler ever had. He was hosting Saturday Night Live. He was appearing on the A-Team. He was on the cover of fucking Sports Illustrated. Are you kidding me? The movies and all of this other stuff, rip them, yeah. But, like, he laid the foundation for so many other people. And when you look at the pay-per-views that we watch, he main evented the first WrestleMania. I would argue, as much as the WWE / Shawn Michaels always put out there that he was Mr. WrestleMania, I would sometimes counter with, well, Taker's the one that for years never lost at WrestleMania, and the show was kind of built around him. Yeah, you could talk about, Shawn Michaels had a great match, but like this guy was the fucking draw, right? Like, that makes him much more WrestleMania. But if we want to be real about it for a second, and you eliminate Vince McMahon from consideration, who technically is the real WrestleMania mastermind, the real Mr. WrestleMania is Hulk Hogan. He main evented WrestleMania 1. He main evented WrestleMania 2. He main evented WrestleMania 3 against Andre the Giant, where I don't care how much Meltzer or anybody else tries to dismiss it, not grasping basic concepts like comp tickets and everything else. There were 90-ish thousand people there at the Silverdome. You go look back at the old setup. Anyways, I'm not here to belabor that point. Macho Man crossed over into being a top flight star because of association with Hogan with the Mega Powers, and then they main evented WrestleMania 5 together. Hulk Hogan legitimized Ultimate Warrior as a main event star in WrestleMania 6 in the Sky Dome, in what I still think is one of the truly great physique versus physique matchups of all time. When you think about notable signature moments at WrestleMania, Hogan's got so many of them. And the impact and legacy of them is significant. And let's not even get to WrestleMania 18, 2002, again in Toronto at the Sky Dome. And you're talking about Rock at kind of like still the peak of his babyface appeal and star power. And that Canada crowd turned on The Rock for a Hogan that had been gone for years, that was being portrayed as NWO in heel, and it produced one of those all-time WrestleMania matchups. Hulk Hogan is Mr. WrestleMania. And when you think back to the all-time feud between Hogan and Andre, WrestleMania 3, and then later that year you get to Survivor Series, the first one. Royal Rumble in 88, the first one. SummerSlam 88, the first one. All of that was built on the back of that Hogan and Andre rivalry. WWE's pay-per-view business, WWF's pay-per-view business, was built on the back of Hulk Hogan. And I'm not trying to sit here and like wax Hogan or anything like that. I'm just trying to state like objective reality here, folks. Because it's true. And there are millions of people such as myself that got into and stayed fans of professional wrestling for years, if not decades, because of Hulk Hogan. And what so annoys me and aggravates me about this now is that because of the way the past 10 to 15 years of his life transpired, I can't come on here like I would want to and be like, well, let me tell you something, brother. That doesn't work for me, brother, oh, brother. And I can't just sit there and talk about the greatness of the Hogan character. I can't talk about the iconic matches and just it without people looking at me sideways. And there's nobody to blame for that ultimately but Hulk Hogan, and it pisses me the fuck off. Because again, I look at this man that had so much indirect influence on my life, and so much of that is ruined. Now, there will be people that hate Hogan because of all the backstage politicking and everything else. That doesn't work for me, brother. Well, that's fair. Terry knew how to book for Terry, and Hogan knew how to make sure he took care of Hogan first and foremost. But let's not pretend like he's the only selfish fuck in the history of the business. You know, he wasn't the one sitting there at Survivor Series 97 and refusing to put Shawn over on his way out of the company because I'm in Canada and I'm a hometown hero. He's not the one that picked up his ball and went home because he didn't want to job out to Brock Lesnar in the King of the Ring qualifying match in 2002. That was Stone Cold Steve Austin. That's the same guy that didn't want to drop the belt to fucking Triple H, right? Yet it was Hogan that submitted via bear hug on a random episode of SmackDown leading up to SummerSlam 2002. And again, you think about so many things with Hogan. Like, I used to hear people talk about Ric Flair's a bigger star. Fuck off. No, he wasn't. You might have liked Ric Flair more, and that's perfectly fine. But the two hottest eras of professional wrestling, Hulk Hogan was the unquestioned top guy of the WWF in the 80s and early 90s. And then as you get to the mid to late 90s, when WCW was threatening WWF and was reigning supreme in the ratings game for 83 weeks straight, who was the primary guy, it wasn't Ric Flair, he was a secondary player, it was fucking Hulk Hogan leading the NWO. The reason the NWO worked is because it was Hogan. The reason that whole build-up, as much as Starrcade 97 ended up being a wet fart of a finish, the whole reason that change of Sting's character and that build-up to that match worked wasn't just because of Sting and how magnificent and awesome Sting is, was, and always will be. It was because it was based off of him trying to get through all of the layers of the NWO to get to fucking Hogan. But to sit there and say, like, Hogan never did the job, like, we didn't watch him put over Warrior 100% clean at WrestleMania 6. He did the right thing for business. At WrestleMania 18, he put over The Rock when he maybe didn't have to, and maybe it wasn't the right call, but he did it. Now, it's probably because he had the guarantee he was going to win the belt a month later from Triple H at Backlash. I get all that, right? But, the selective outrage here, but again, Hogan built himself a legacy of this, and he has to own it. And to the people that talked about how much he's lied over the years, yeah, and like that's really hard to defend, right? A guy that his whole entire life and industry was about working people, he seemed to have trouble separating Terry Bollea from Hulk Hogan, and they merged, and he created this fucking fantasy world for himself, and sometimes you just looked at it and say, shut the fuck up. And that's kind of hard to defend, right? Now, you're going to have some that don't like him because he was MAGA, especially there towards the end. And frankly, I don't give a fuck because a lot of your favorite wrestlers are. Who gives a shit? Like, they want to believe that stupid crap, that's up to them. It really shouldn't impact you in terms of whether you watch him or not as a wrestler. It really shouldn't impact me, and it doesn't. Like, who cares at the end of the day, right? But to those that say, well, he was hated just because he was a big Trump supporter, like, you're disconnected from fucking reality. That was, if anything, another reason for some folks maybe to not like him, but was not the primary reason. Let's be clear here, and let's address the big-ass bogey in the fucking room. The reason that Hulk Hogan isn't being universally commemorated and celebrated, and in some ways, the only reason he's being commemorated and celebrated is because he's fucking dead, is because of his racism. It's because of what he said and the lengths of what he said. And not only that, it was the fact that he showed a clear lack of contrition, a clear lack of understanding for why what he said was wrong. He seemed to be more focused on not what he said or what he did, but that he was caught. You got to be careful with the cameras, brother. That's the wrong fucking message. Like, look, humans aren't perfect. That's true. We make mistakes, and some certainly are more egregious than others. That is also true. People, Americans in particular, can be forgiving, and American society as a whole loves to build up somebody, tear him way the fuck down back to the studs, and say, we're going to build him back up. Like you saw this with Mike Tyson over the past 20 plus years. American society and the media couldn't wait to tear him fucking down in the early 90s. And then they built him back up to the point where you can even forget that he's a fucking convicted rapist that served like 5 years in prison. Just saying. So whether you think he did it or not, the reality is, if a Mike Tyson appears in a WWE ring, you've got all of these people cheering and celebrating him. Meanwhile, Hulk Hogan, the racist, they boo and condemn and celebrate that he's dead. Kind of fucked up to me. Like, where's the consistency here? You'll pop like crazy if you see Steve Austin, even though he pled no contest to beating his wife. Like, I'm sorry here, and maybe this is the white guy talking, but, you know, if we don't think of wife beating and rape at least a similar or more severe level than spoken word racism, we've got a fucking problem. Okay? We do. And in my opinion, your fucking priorities are screwed up. It's just what it is. But again, when I look at somebody that had so much indirect influence on my life, and knowing that those last several years, he just never seemed to grasp or get why people would be upset with him, why people would think he was a racist. They would think you're a racist because you said really racist shit. And you showed absolutely zero understanding of the impact of that, zero contrition for that, zero willingness to truly show personal accountability and own up to that garbage. So you're going to have those, I know, over the past few days that have celebrated it. And you know what? I'm not going to criticize them. Because Hogan ultimately created that environment. He did. That's on him. And if you're going to sit there and say, well, he apologized for the da-da-da, he made a mistake. No, he didn't just make a mistake, and he didn't really apologize for it. Because apologizing is not saying I apologize. That's the type of shit you usually get out of women, which is totally trying to deflect real accountability and blame. And even saying I'm sorry is not showing like true remorse and true guilt, true contrition, like true I want to make things right. It's not just about your fucking words, it's about your actions. And his actions in the last several years of his life after that video dropped were not good. So to sit there and not understand why there would be certain people, white and especially black, that would be bothered by Hulk Hogan because of the ignorant, racist fucking shit he said is just disconnected from fucking reality. It's idiotic. And for me, selfishly, it's the ultimate conflict. And I've talked about this, like I said in the video a couple years ago about Hulk Hogan's legacy, and it holds true. Like, how do I rationalize the indirect influence and all the good memories I have associated with him with knowing the type of person that he was and the lack of contrition and remorse that he showed for the racist things that he said? And that he seemed to be more concerned about the fact that it was recorded and that he got caught. And to those that are just going to say, well, you just say, fuck them, maybe, right? You know, there's a part of me when I look back at the direct influence of my mom and how hard my life was growing up, in part because she didn't give enough of a fuck. There certainly are times, even now, where I sit there and want to say, fuck her. I'm not sad that she's dead. I hope she rests in peace, but she sure didn't make my life peaceful, right? Well, it's very easy to say the same thing about Hogan. Like, yeah, you had a great career, but that butt afterwards is a motherfucker. And it's probably not something that's going to get better with time. Nor should it. You know, ironically, again, we've got to call out the hypocrisy here, and I'm going to. You know, the same people that'll sit there and talk about Hogan and condemn him for his racism, again, they're right to do so, but don't then be sitting there and popping in R. Kelly music and listening to him. And you're going to say, well, that's not exactly the same. No, it's worse. R. Kelly is a proven, like, serial pedophile, serving many years in federal pound them in the ass prison, right? And you can say, well, that's whataboutism. Yeah, it is. Well, so is fucking life. It's pointing to the lack of consistency, the hypocrisy of it all. But yeah, it's fuck you, Hogan, for the racism and the lack of contrition and the lack of apology, while also acknowledging that for so many people and millions of people throughout the country and throughout the world that watch professional wrestling, it is in no small part due to, if not a large part due to, fucking Hulk Hogan. It's always going to be a complicated legacy with him. And like I said, it's really sad to me that in this video talking about his passing, I have to talk about shit like that instead of perhaps talking about those highlights of his career. I mean, this is a man that once in February of 1988, the night he lost the title to Andre, 33 million people watched that. 33 million. And you'll hear a lot of just excuses and justifications about that audience number. It was 33 fucking million people. And it wasn't like cable television was only in 10,000 homes. There was competition, folks. 33 million people watched. In a country with a much smaller populace at that time in 1988. It's just astounding. Like, that's how big professional wrestling was during his time. And those are the types of things that I wish I could talk about. The most impactful heel turn, arguably, of all time when he joined the Outsiders of Hall and Nash at Bash at the Beach 96 and he drops the leg on Macho Man and the NWO was formed. You know, when he body slams Andre the Giant and the Pontiac Silverdome crowd erupts. You know, like, the whole Hogan-Andre feud and all that went with it. Like, I mean, my God. Him and, like, Warrior and the classic at WrestleMania 6. I'd love to sit here and talk about the Mega Powers and then the Mega Powers exploding. But even when I do, it's always going to be in the background, but Hulk Hogan was a fucking racist. And it sucks. But it is what it is. You know, some people are going to probably make snide remarks about, well, you know, he's going to get cremated because there ain't no way Hulk Hogan's letting anybody bury him. And you got to kind of admit that's appropriate. That doesn't work for me, brother, from Beyond the Grave. Some people sit there and say, oh, Malcolm Jamal Warner passed. Well, he wasn't going to let the black man get one over on him one last time. And again, I'd be like, touche. Ozzy Osbourne's a big star, but when he died, Hogan said, that doesn't work for me, brother. And he deuced out then. Fair enough. But yeah, it's a complicated legacy. I wish it was more simplistic. I wish it was a little bit more cut and dry. But it's not. People are entitled to have whatever fucking opinions they want to have on it. Sure. But if you sit there and you minimize this and say, like, it doesn't change all that he contributed and did for professional wrestling, in some ways you're right. In some ways you're absolutely wrong. Like, there was a stain there. You don't just wash that away. And he never really put in the work to wash that away. And especially for, like, white people sitting there trying to tell black people how to feel about it. Like, you're not black. Stop trying to tell them how to feel about it. It's not my call, right? So I shouldn't be telling them. I can sit there and maybe point to, like, for black or white, like, the hypocrisy of some of this shit. And that holds up and that's true. And if you've got a problem with that, that's not my fucking problem. That's yours to reconcile and rationalize and deal with. But don't be sitting there and telling black people that they can't be happy that Hogan is dead, or can't sit there and say, well, he got his karma and his comeuppance. Because at the end of the day, Hogan put himself in this fucking position. He did. And he didn't do anything to unbury himself. Ironically enough, the guy that loved to bury anybody else at the end of the day did more to throw dirt on his own legacy than anybody else possibly could have imagined to do. And that's a real tragedy. So Hulk Hogan will go down in history, no matter how much anybody wants to dismiss it, as the biggest superstar, not just in WWE history, but in the history of professional wrestling. That's an unequivocal fact. As Meltzer put it himself, and he was so right. There's been no wrestler or performer ever that more people have paid more money to watch or had more eyeballs drawn to watching them. You know, I wish I could sit there and go back and talk about the TNA times and my favorite time of doing YouTube back in 2011. You had the build up to Sting versus Hogan and fucking Bound for Glory. I wish I could talk about all that stuff. And I suppose there's a place to do it, but even when you do, it's always going to come back to this. And then when you take the racism and you layer on the selfishness and the lying and the backstage politics, that doesn't work for me, brother. It builds this really incredibly complicated legacy to fully embrace, for sure. And a legacy that many people have chosen, will continue to choose, and will always choose to hate on. And they have that right to do so. And again, at the end of the day, there's nobody to blame for that ultimately but Hulk Hogan. I wish it was different, but it's not. So there may be times that I'll do videos that will look back on a signature Hogan moment or career accomplishment or something controversial about him, what have you. But I know no matter what one I do and no matter what I say about him, it is going to be divisive and a bit of a lightning rod. Oh well, such is life. And there are those that are sad that Terry Bollea is no longer living his life. And I understand. And there are others that are very happy that he is no longer living his life. And unfortunately, I have to understand that too. Because, brother, you did it to yourself.